Andrew is on the board of the Fogarty Institute and is the vice president and general manager of Medtronic's Transcatheter Mitral valve venture, following the recent acquisition of his company 12 Inc. By Medtronic. His company before that, which was called Ardian, was also acquired by Medtronic, and together those acquisitions total in $1.4 billion. So next to him is Anne Morrissey. Anne is the CEO of InPress Technologies, which you'll hear more about in a minute. Anne brings more than 20 years of successful early stage experience at startups. She's founded 2 startups in the medical space before. Next on the list we have Sergio. Sergio is a pioneer in stereoscopic 3D systems, and I highly recommend you take a look at his demo on the side here afterwards if you're interested in 3D technology or how it could be used in the medical space. He has over 15 years of experience in visualization systems and is the founder and CTO of EchoPixel. And then last year we have Shin, last but definitely not least. Shin is the new director of the healthcare business at Mitsubishi Corporation. In his role, he spearheads the company's business operations and developments in North America and joined the Fogarty Institute, which assists Mitsubishi in finding innovative medical technologies and devices that benefit global healthcare markets. So he's here to give us kind of a different perspective of the medtech industry. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start from Andrew and give him a chance to talk a little bit about the Fogarty Institute and what its space is in the medical industry, and give everyone a chance to talk a little bit more about their own space in this industry.
So I think what I'm here really to do is to set up these 3 guys. They got the interesting and exciting technology, but I'd really like to talk about what the Institute does and what we provide our companies in residence. So I took this out of a values or a core principles statement from Ardian, actually. And what we were trying to show here is really the relationship between tech and medtech. Very clearly, both have had huge societal impacts. Google, the preeminent tech company. But one thing that does slightly differentiate us here is that what we're doing has direct impact on people and on their health and their well-being. So this was, as I said, one of our favorite comments, that we fully understand that the product that we all have today is to be used in someone's mother or father, son or daughter. And most importantly, we really take that responsibility very seriously. And I think you'll see that through some of these conversations. That innovation is the lifeblood of medical advancement. Without a doubt, we need to continue to learn and continue to adapt technologies and procedures and methods along the way. Unfortunately, the traditional process, venture capital, has been and is fraught with obstacles. And what we're seeing right now for young companies, what we call sort of pre or Series A companies, a real huge hurdle in front of all of these companies. And it fits of 3 parts. And this is, again, where I think we differ slightly from tech. All right, that we've got to spend a lot of time in development. The average time for one of our companies is about 8 years and $80 million. So there's a lot of money, a lot of effort that goes into establishing the companies, developing the ideas, bringing that into the clinic, and then testing this and experimenting, which is what we do, on humans, making sure that that's done in a very rigorous, thoughtful, and respectful way. We've got the regulatory environment that is tough. It's a pretty tough world out there, and it's not just the United States, it's global. What I've seen in the last year is actually a real interesting change where FDA has become a lot more approachable for us, and yet the Europeans are becoming much less approachable. Historically, we would go outside of the US to do a lot of our early work, gather that information, bring that into the US through the FDA and go forward. I'm actually seeing that change right now. But what that brings is a degree of uncertainty. And that uncertainty associated with uncertainty in the reimbursement process, actually being able to get paid for the technology, which is getting worse, right? We're clearly seeing that that's getting harder and harder to get clear direction from our reimbursement agencies. And so what that leads to at the end is it makes it very difficult to finance companies. Prachi mentioned that the last 2 companies that I've had the honor to be involved with were sold for about, give or take, $1.4 billion, which I know to you guys is probably not that much, but in the medtech world, it's a fair chunk of change. And yet 4 of the VCs that funded us in our early series are no longer investing in early stage startups, right? So despite that success, these guys have chosen to go and invest in other areas. So that leads to the Fogarty Institute and what we're here to do. The whole point of the Institute is to provide these guys with a period of time in which they can develop and grow to a point where we can get them to a good funding stage. This gentleman that you see here is our version of a Sergey Brin or a Mark Zuckerberg. It's Dr. Tom Fogarty has been working in this industry. He's an innovator, a leader, has been really focusing on the patient first for a decade upon decades. And his quote here is, "There must be a better way," is what led to the development of the Institute. So I think this is really important to give you an idea of Dr. Fogarty's background. He's the inventor of hundreds of patents. He started 30-plus companies. He's got the Lemelson MIT Prize for Invention and Innovation. He's in the National Inventors Hall of Fame, and he's got the National Medal of Technology and Innovation that he received from President Obama, and then promptly left it on the plane in the overhead compartment. And that's not a joke, that's real. But one of the first things he came up with is this, and this is the Fogarty balloon catheter. And the Fogarty balloon catheter looks a very simple invention, but it has become the forefather of interventional cardiology and all cardiology as we've moved forward. This is a device that was invented, and Fred, I'm guessing, is 20 years ago plus? 50. Well, slightly off. 50 years ago. And there's still, to this day, over 300,000 cases per year globally. And he's impacted more than 15 million people around the world. So his thinking, along with a few other very smart folks, was to come up with the Fogarty Institute for Innovation. It's an educational nonprofit, I think, which becomes very important, and that's allowing us now to have great breadth of involvement. And we really do 2 things. And that's incubation, so that is identifying companies of this nature, being able to bring them in, provide them with the expertise and an infrastructure around them to allow them to grow and really to nurture them through what is a very tough stage. We were talking this morning about what is a success for us. A success for us is for these companies to go on and achieve their mission over time, not just a matter of being able to exit from the Institute with funding. We'd like them to be very successful. The other component is one of education and focusing really on educating the next generation of engineers coming through. We've got a couple of fellowship programs, the Left Draw Fellowship Program, the Farrell and Powell Fellowship Program, and a couple of other areas which I think are really ambitious, which is bringing in FDA. So we've had FDA coming into the organization, and we work with them and introduce them to the startup world so that they have a better perspective, a better understanding of what we need to go through. And that, from personal experience in talking to these guys, has been quite remarkable. I wanted to show you this, and I'm going to just let the words speak for itself. This was an email that I got from a patient recently. In her own words. So I think the purpose of me showing this was, it's the first time too that I've actually been able to put this on the screen and not cry when it's come across the screen because of the impact it has. It just shows this is what we're doing, right? We have an opportunity to help people. The success of any of our business is not measured in acquisition costs or anything else. It's measured in the people that we affect. And it's not just this lady that we helped. It's her family, her surrounding family, the kids, her support group, her parents, and the like. So we wanted to just put that in concept as we're about to walk through the rest of the companies. We'd love this to be interactive as we go through, so please don't hesitate I'm hoping that's right. Absolutely. Don't hesitate to ask questions. And we're trying to go relatively quickly so you've got an opportunity to really dig in afterwards. So that said, I'm going to pass this over.
So my name is Ann Morrison. I'm the CEO of Impress Technologies, and we have a very simple and elegant device that is aimed at eradicating postpartum hemorrhage. So postpartum hemorrhage is the #1 cause of maternal death in the world. Every 6 minutes, a woman dies. One of the facts that kind of sticks in my head that one of our clinical advisors pointed out is that 240 women a day is a large plane of women every day that die from postpartum hemorrhage. So it's a big problem. It's also kind of unique in developing medical technology in that we have a device that actually will have more impact in the developing world over the developed world because the incidence is much, much higher. So here in the US, the reported incidence is 1% to 2%. In places in Africa, it's up to 25% of women will have postpartum hemorrhage. So this is the device. Actually, for those of you maybe not totally familiar with the anatomy, if you look at the photo, it's the green loop that goes inside of the uterus, and the balloon part that's on the shaft will sit outside the cervix. And it's a very simple, all silicone device that in the first in human cases that we did, so we've done 10 cases in Jakarta, Indonesia, where in under 2 minutes, the bleeding stopped. So there's no other device or drug or anything out that's available that works that quickly and that effectively. So if you look at the world, I just spoke to this a little bit, the darker the pink, the greater the maternal mortality ratio. And as you can see, places in kind of India, Asia, and Africa, and some places, spotty places across South America, are where the incidence of mortality from PPH is the highest. So one of the things that is interesting and that is challenging about having a device like this, that I've done consumer products and I've done medical technology, and like Andrew said, the thing that brought me back and always brings me back to medical devices is the fact that something as simple as this can actually save people's lives. And the other piece of it, though, that makes it really, really challenging is the regulatory environment. So we have to do 150 cases for the FDA, which we have to do many of those here in the United States. So there's a time period of which we cannot sell this device. Women can't benefit from this device while we are collecting clinical data that will then support our FDA clearance. And then actually all of that takes time, which equates to money as well. So again, those are kind of the things that underlie being able to have the impact on the global impact that we hope to have on the number of maternal deaths, being able to impact and reduce the number of PPH cases that lead to serious morbidities, and the impact that has on both the mother, the child, and their social environment in which they live. So complex regulatory process. For us, one of the challenges for us as a U.S. company is that for us to be able to go to places in Africa, we still have to have U.S. Approval for really being able to drive adoption and really be able to have an impact at scale. They look to the U.S. as the home country approval for us to be able to have that impact. So it's an important part of our strategy. It's also from a regulatory standpoint, but also from a business standpoint to be able to have sustainable profitability. And for us, it's actually, instead of doing traditional venture capital, we've done a non-traditional funding for a med device company, which includes high net worth individuals and grants. So we have a slightly different business model in that way, which actually makes it a lot of fun. So I will turn it over to EchoPixel.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Sergio Aguirre. I'm founder and CTO of EchoPixel. And we've been very fortunate to be working at the Fogarty Institute for Innovation now for a few years. And what EchoPixel focuses on is on solving what we see as a very big problem in the medical space, which is that medical imaging is incomplete. A lot of the public believes that there's already very high advanced CT scanners and MRIs, and that doctors have access to fantastic technology. That is true, but our whole philosophy and our vision is really that the way that doctors consume these images is still locked into the late 19th century. So if you look at the images that we have on our slides, you'll see a bunch of doctors in the early 1900s looking at many, many X-ray images. And that's really the same way that now in the modern world, CT scanners, MRI, ultrasound, and a whole myriad of devices that acquire data just acquire much, much more data, thousands of images per patient. And so you have doctors literally still looking at many, many images and trying to put that together in their brain to figure out what anatomy they're looking at. So, I like to say as an engineer that these are still souped up light boxes. And so what we've done is gone out and done a new software platform for what we consider our next generation displays. And our software, what it does is really a platform that allows doctors to look at patient-specific anatomy from a CT scanner, from an MRI, and allow them to develop new ways of solving clinical problems through protocols. And this has helped doctors and our current users to improve patient outcomes. So they can find more things, they have a better understanding of the patient's anatomy before surgery. And it's just providing a great tool for not only getting better results for the patient, but also to having doctors communicate between themselves. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But what actually you could see in a demo here, and what we do is we're driving these displays to create an open 3D space on top of somebody's desk where you can see body parts and look around it and also reach in and create cross sections or grab a tumor and pull it out. So it's something that doesn't need any pre-processing. Doctors can just go and get the data automatically from their own networks in the hospital, and they can share this information. So what's happening is more clinicians are being able to access this very rich information of patients. And right now, every hospital is generating about 20 terabytes on average in the US of data. And that's only consumed by one department in general in the hospital, which is radiology department. So you have a dozen doctors that are working through this vast amount of data, while all of the other clinicians in the hospital are just referring to text reports. And so there's a really gap and a lot of opportunities to miss clinically significant information. And so this type of visualization and interaction that True3D provides is allowing more doctors to use that information and provide better patient care. So a couple of examples. This is our software running. You can grab objects and move them around. You can change the rendering parameters on the fly. You can create cross sections. And a lot of our clinicians will be using this to do surgical planning, to see how they need to approach different parts of the body, see if they can fit a device into it. And here you're going to see a hand come into the video and just grab a part of the abdomen and try and understand it better. So all of this is something that's going to happen on the fly. You have a doctor really getting a very deep understanding of that patient. And the way that we like to describe that is because doctors right now, when they're looking at 2D images, they're solving a 3D problem before they ever consider the clinical problem. This way, we're allowing them to be more intuitive. They don't have to solve that 3D problem. They can focus on the clinical problem at hand right away. And this really helps them free up a lot of that cognitive energy that they're spending on solving that problem before ever getting to the problem, the patient. So just as an example, Stanford, one of our earlier customers and users, has been using this to do surgical planning in the pediatric congenital heart defect space. So this is a very complicated problem. You have newborn patients that sometimes are weeks old, and they have malformations in their hearts. They have vessels that are not connected in the right place. And we were surprised when we were working with Stanford that they were giving a paper-drawn illustration to the surgeon that they would take into the OR and use that in the operating room. So in the image that you have on screen, you should see on the left side this illustration. So now what they do is they bring the data into True 3D and they create a virtual digital copy of the patient that they can trace and annotate. And now surgeons have this digital copy right next to the patient and refer to that patient as they're doing surgery. And one thing that's very important, right, this is very complicated surgery. So that patient is going to be about the size of the palm of your hand. Their heart is going to be about the size of a walnut. And the vessels that they're treating are sub-millimeter. So it's very complicated to map from a 2D illustration to the patient and from 2D images. Whereas now they can have this interactive digital copy of the patient to work with. And so Stanford has actually now changed the way that they plan these surgeries for pediatric cases to always use True 3D. Patients have reduced radiation, and they're getting great results. Another example, one of our customers, Leahy Clinic, has also changed the way that they are doing aneurysm treatment in the brains, in patients' brain. So it would take them a lot longer time to understand how they need to reach into the brain and treat this malformation in a vessel. And they many times would size incorrectly an implantable device. So they would try one device and then bring it out and try another one. So with our system now, they've discovered that they can more accurately size these devices, and they're trying one device. And so there's a lot of implications there, not only for the patient, which is less anesthesia, less time in the OR. That means less time to recover post-surgery, less time in the ICU. But a lot of these cases are done in something called interventional radiology, where there's radiation that the doctor is actually absorbing. So less radiation for the doctor as well. So all around, we've had a very positive experience. One thing that I would add about the Fogarty Institute, EchoPixel started very much as a radiology company, and we were very fortunate enough to be at Fogarty, where we were going through our FDA process. We're FDA approved, and we had 3 radiologists and 3 surgeons work with our FDA process. And during that process, we found that the surgeons were actually outperforming the radiologists. And so we were very fortunate to be there because the Fogarty Institute has very readily access to a lot of clinicians, and we've now focused a lot of our commercial efforts on addressing surgery issues. So I think that is a brief introduction to us. I'll hand it over.
So hi again. My name is Shin Kosuga from Mitsubishi Corporation. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Mitsubishi Corporation and how it has relationship with Fogarty Institute. So you might know the name Mitsubishi Corporation, but Mitsubishi is actually one of the largest, world's largest hospital distribution company. So what I want to talk about is, you might know the brand Mitsubishi. It has a lot of businesses. It's actually a very big enterprise. It has $60 billion in revenue and actually $2 billion in healthcare. So what does Mitsubishi, this big company, have to why does it want to partner with Fogarty Institute? So the reason is, so I just talked about how Mitsubishi is a distributor to Asian countries, including Japan. So we're constantly looking for cutting edge, the best medical technologies out there. And actually, it's really, really hard for us to do it. And being at Fogarty Institute, it makes it much, much easier for us. And the current medtech investment climate is so difficult. So in that sense, it's difficult as well. So it makes it easier for us. And so by being at the Fogarty Institute, it makes it easier because we can be there where the high quality supported startups are. So it gives us the partnering opportunities. And the other reason is we have the opportunity of sending our employees to as a fellow in a fellowship program. So the two of the fellowship programs that we've done in the past is, one is the startup fellowship. So we actually send our employees to be working inside a startup, and we get the experience of actually working inside an innovative medical device company. And by bringing that experience back to Mitsubishi, which you can imagine is a very bureaucratic company, we get the experience of how to create those innovative companies. And the other fellowship program is we send our employees to the hospital as well, where we can learn how the hospital is operated. So by these two fellowship programs, we benefit a lot in getting to know and learn the healthcare environment here. And finally, I want to touch on this point about the Medtech ecosystem. So just by being inside the Fogarty Institute, we get to touch all of these members of the Medtech ecosystem. So from the top right-hand side, you see the hospital, and then clockwise, you see the Medtech companies, the academia to Stanford, the physicians and the government agencies, and the investment companies. So by just being inside the Fogarty Institute, we get to kind of interact, get to know the Medtech ecosystem, and from there we can create business. So that's why we're at the Fogarty Institute.
So I wanted to do a quick speed round off the top of your head. So first thing you think of, or new problems do you see that are really going to change where medtech goes in the next 10 or 20 years? Speed round. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go first quickly. I think what you're seeing with most of us is we're focusing on the disease as it's already into patients, and in the company I'm involved with right now, it's a lot of end-stage disease, where I see it's moving to, and I'm hoping with relationships with tech companies, with Google, is we're moving up to prevention. Let's stop people getting these diseases that we're subsequently treating. That's what I see.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that diagnostics today are where it's exploding, and I think that will shift where we're treating them. But I think ultimately, a lot of the fundamentals of this just medtech space will continue to exist because they're human bodies that are involved.
Yeah, we see two drivers: a higher reliance on data, not just medical image, but also a lot of other data like genomics and patient information. And the other thing that we see very exciting is a much higher reliance on robotics. So the treatment and the delivery of devices is going to be mainly begin to be provided by robotics. So we're very excited about those two things.
So coming from Japan, Japan, as you know, is one of the most quickly aging countries. So we're very interested in technologies that kind of alleviate the burden on the clinicians. So one technologies that we're kind of focusing on is artificial intelligence and how it can help clinicians to kind of speed up, be more efficient in making decisions and performing their practices. And also maybe some nursing technologies. So we have a very large population of aging old people. So nursing technologies that kind of alleviates the burden as well. Those two are kind of what we're looking for.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Andrew?
I think you got 3 comments from us looking into the future, but the real one that sort of anchors it is the comment that you just made. Because if we're still using 300,000 Fogarty balloons 50 years after it was invented, we've got to remember there's fundamental patients that we're dealing with, and we really haven't changed that much.
Yeah. But I think the point that both of you have made about data is really interesting and how that has changed what you can build. But has that also changed what the FDA requires, or what changes in the regulations because we have more data to be able to show that this technology is successful or not?
Well, so the FDA definitely wants data, but the kind of data they want for a device that goes in and fixes something in a human body requires use in the human body. So I think the data that you're talking about, I think, informs, for example, the type of product that you're developing. Algorithms and things like that will be more impacted by the amount of data that's available.
Yeah, we've actually seen some initiatives from industry, from the implantable device companies. They've partnered and created a consortium. I can't remember the name at the top of my head, but they're beginning to work with the FDA to create patient models. So instead of going very early to do animal testing or in-human testing, you might have a model of the heart where you can simulate a heart valve or a vessel and do some finite element analysis very early on, kind of speed up your development in some way. But it's very early. This consortium is kind of defining what is real actionable data and what is not. And so it's just bringing all these different data sets, again, patient information, outcomes, material science, and imaging and algorithms to create those models and be able to predict. A lot of AI, but it's in the early phases, and I think it still has some development to get to that.
Very cool. All right. Go ahead.
Sorry, just
No
two
problem.
comments. I think FDA really is trying to adapt to the digital, what we're calling digital health. And so I do think they're really trying to look ahead. So give them credit for that. The thing I think we have to take responsibility, we, Google, everyone else, is really understanding what is actionable, what is needed. I remember listening to a person I respect greatly up on a panel talking about these ECG patches and the like, saying that is the last thing that he wants is for all his patients to be coming on a monthly basis and here's my monthly download of data. Because he now has a responsibility to either look through that, and if he misses, he's got a liability issue. So he was like, I don't want any of that information. So I think this understanding, there's a lot of things we can measure and record, but is it useful and is it going to be actionable? It's going to be really, you're going to have to be thoughtful about what we do.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and just really quickly to second what Andrew has been saying, we've found the FDA to be very, very open. In fact, we're about to get CE mark. A lot of companies first go to get CE mark, the approval in Europe. We actually found it easier to work with the FDA, and we're finding it harder to work with the European agencies.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent.
So I think it's a great opportunity. The FDA is very open to new technologies and to understanding, and they're willing to be educated. So all of these things require that input and that education to really be able to push things forward.
Sand Hill Road's requirements don't really line up with what Medtech needs. So what does the future look like?
So I think it still does. I think that model isn't dead. I think what we're going to see is a consolidation of a smaller number of VCs that are investing early stage, and 5-10 years from now, you're going to see that they're going to get some good returns, which will then attract more people back into that early stage. I'm just seeing this. I've been doing this for 28 years. I'm sort of seeing this cyclic effect. But I think in the short term, we're going to need to seek other sources of funds. They're going to be just like you are, right?
Yeah.
You're looking for a different way of getting funding. I do think some of the larger corporations are looking at coming back in, but their risk tolerance is no different from the venture capital. I think we're overreacting just a little to that what we had was in 2008 with the global meltdown, we had too many venture capitalists investing in too many companies, and therefore the returns that they were getting were diluted. I think what we're seeing now is we've gone too far. The pendulum swung too far the other way, in that we got too few companies. But I think if what we see is we start to get some of the returns, I'm hoping that will come back a little bit. So I'm not giving up on that venture model yet.
So I have a little bit of a different take on the venture model, because I think that there is a tremendous amount of value in it, but I also think in large scale, I think it's gotten too large, and I think it's fundamentally broken for some companies. I think that the time horizon can actually kill technologies that could be fantastic. And I think that there are emerging a lot of different capital sources that are interesting. I think a lot of them are, again, just some of the funding that we've done is not necessarily, I think, what's emerging, but I think that there are other options other than venture capital that people who want to invest in a privately held company that might be a sustainable, profitable entity is a very different than somebody who wants to have a 5-year turn and flip and return in that time horizon. So I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah. I got to put a plug in. I forgot when my answer to you was based on my startup role, my role within the Fogarty Institute. That's what we exist for, right? Which is to provide that environment that these companies can get that experience, get that FIM, as you said. It used to be you could get funded on an idea. Now you can only get funded if you've got clinical data. And so what we're trying to provide is that bridge and that mentorship and that education during that period of time. So that's the whole purpose of the Institute.
Do you feel like in order to get that, have those clinical trials, the grants and private donors, is that the way to get funding for the stuff that you do before you can go to FIN?
You get the money wherever you can get it.
Yeah.
I think the issue though when you're a startup CEO is that you want that money to be continuous, right? And so that's where these emerging or alternate partners are normally very early stage. And the issue there is that they end up getting diluted out if that does take the 8 to 10 years to get to maturation or exit. So I think that that's where we've got to be careful. That's why I keep going back to that. The venture model is probably still the primary way that we're going to do this, but in the short term, we've got to get money from wherever we can to make sure that these technologies move forward. I think we had this conversation the other day that if you go online and look at the Fogarty Institute now and look at what companies are in-house, they're predominantly women's health. And that is because that's just an area that's just not seeing funding from VCs. But it is an area which is obviously near and dear to all of us, and an area that we need to be supporting. So I think that what I'd like to see is a couple of successes come down the line which change the way these guys think. The other is we had this conversation the other day and you corrected me on it, was there's a difference in return from a startup that you're going to get from a tech company. Right? The timing windows for a successful tech is pretty short with relatively little investment. For us, it's completely the opposite. But in the long run, we're going to return pretty steady, sort of returns. They're just not as sexy as the tech returns.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Other questions? Yeah.
I had a follow-up on the data question. With sensors and connectivity getting, smaller, lower power, more ubiquitous. The idea of embedding more sensors into medical devices so that you can, in the development phase, get a better idea of what's working, what's not, or even in the production phase, to have a better way to track, is your device still working? I realize it makes the development more complicated, but is that a future that that you could see happening?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely, but you're exactly right. My job as a startup CEO is to focus on our technology and try and limit distractions. And so introducing another experimental technology on top of that was going to cause you angst. So that stuff needs to be validated independent. But yeah, I think that we need to be a lot smarter, particularly the sensor technology and how we can leverage that in. Absolutely, and I think that's a good use of the sensor technology. Getting back to the comment we made before about being really thoughtful, you can measure anything, right? You've got to be careful about what you're measuring because there are real world implications of that. Just like I was saying, the physician doesn't want that information. If it was me, I'd want him to be reading it, but he can't do it for every one of us in this room, right? And so that's just not going to happen. So yeah, the answer is a qualified yes.
Yeah, it seems like it got easy enough, then it could help in the device development because you get a much better feedback potentially about what's working, what's not in individual people. But long term, you would love to know, some non-invasive way to know your stent is still open and ideas like that.
Mm-hmm. So I know we run out of time, but I got a good joke, right? So one of our board meetings a couple of years ago was landing on April 1st. And so we've got a mitral valve, and I'm sure that's a pretty big valve, and there's a lot of real estate that's just not used. It's just got to fit within the heart. And so I went into a board meeting with a lot of sensors that we'd put onto this thing because digital health was becoming sexy. So we could turn our device into a digital health device, and by the way, it fixes your valve. It didn't take them too long to realize that it was an April Fool's joke. So that's about as where we are right now.
Sexy, but maybe not.
Sexy, but not useful.
Not useful yet. Easy. What makes the Fogarty Institute different than the other Medtech incubators that exist across the United States and the world?
I'll let the three companies answer.
Well, it's a great question. I haven't been in any other incubator, so I don't have an inside-out comparison to make. I think from just the outside looking in and seeing what some of the other organizations might do, I think it's a shorter term relationship, and I think that as Andrew was saying, I think the longer term horizon is important given a whole multitude of factors, regulatory funding, et cetera, that helps really launch companies. I think that would differentiate it from others.
Yeah, from our perspective, what we've experienced is it's allowed us to really drive something that we believe is fundamental to our company, which is to establish these clinical technical ties. So we do software and we can access a lot of data, but by being able to have very direct contact with many clinicians, we can identify the data sources that are important and the things that the clinicians can really take action from. So this bringing together of the clinical input and what is significant and how to apply the technology and show it to a clinician fast, it's allowing us to iterate very quickly, get to prototypes that are minimal viable products that we can then take through our regulatory process or take to customers. So that is what we've experienced as a great advantage. It's something that we haven't seen in other places.
Yeah, so we're not the startup living inside the Fogarty Institute, so we are the large company. So from our perspective as a large company, so I just talked about how we get the access to the ecosystem and not just the startups, but other constituents in the ecosystem. So that's one thing, and we're very honored to have that opportunity, so yeah.
Yeah, so my take is this slide captures a lot of it, and so it was a great slide that you put together, which is the ecosystem. Right? They've had the opportunity to expose our companies to the FDA, to have FDA be exposed to our companies, both big and small. Right? There are differences there. We're based within El Camino Hospital, and so the access to the staff at El Camino and the actual real-world environment of a community hospital, not a premier top of the, well, they cross their premier on top of the line, but not a teaching hospital. This is a real hospital where real world work gets done. And so having exposure to that, having exposure, part of the fellowship programs that we're talking about, bringing the young engineers in, for those guys to have any value to, so that to some degree free labor, but they're getting benefit at the same time. So we've got this whole ecosystem that is just linked to each other. I'm not sure that there's any other group that provides that.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.